Hello, Crafty Crandall fam. I am coming at you from the floor behind my desk so that I can show you my whole watercolor collection. I have done this video before, so if you're interested in seeing that one, I will link it above in the cards, but I figured it was past time to do an updated one, and I actually got a request to do this video, so I am going to go ahead here and lay out my entire watercolor collection for you, tell you which supplies I use the most, which ones I don't really use that often, tell you which ones I like the best, and just give you an overview of all of the watercolor supplies that I own. The first category of watercolors that I am going to go through are what I'm calling my repeat offenders. So these are watercolors that I had when I filmed the last video that I still use and love today and don't plan on getting rid of anytime soon. Perhaps the most noteworthy of these is, of course, my Sennelier watercolors. So these two rows of watercolors are the Sennelier L'Aquarelle Artist Watercolors. They are my go-to, tried and true, love them, use them all the time watercolors. So these have not changed from my last video. I still use these probably the most often of any of my watercolors, and I still love them, though I do plan on replacing the colors that I use the most with some different brands so that I can try out some different watercolors. My next palette here has my Holbein watercolors along with a couple of others. I've got an M. Graham and a Winsor & Newton Cotman here and here, but these two rows are my Holbein watercolors. These are my travel watercolors. I use them a lot, probably less frequently than the Sennelier, but anytime that I am traveling, these are my go-to. I absolutely love them and wouldn't change this palette for anything. My Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolors are the colors that I started watercolor with. I started kind of dabbling more seriously with these paints, and while I found great use out of them then, I haven't used them in a really long time, so they kind of just sit in my watercolor collection, though I do definitely recommend them for beginners. Going along with those, I have the Kuretake Gansai Tambi gold colors, which I really love and do use pretty frequently to supplement all the rest of my watercolors when I need a pop of gold. I then have here all of these miscellaneous tubes of watercolor. I was given these by my dad. They are mostly Grumbacher Academy watercolors and Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors, which both are great brands for student grade watercolors and starting out. I just don't reach for them that frequently because I have so many other options. So I have these. I would recommend them to people, but I don't personally reach for them all the time because I prefer palletized watercolor as opposed to tubes, and I just don't reach for these as frequently as everything else that I have. My next category of watercolors are going to be the ones that I have purchased since making my last watercolor collection video and have tried in the interim period. These are watercolors that I either bought because I wanted to try them or they were gifted to me. The first watercolors in this category are my Shinhan Professional Watercolors. These are a great student grade line. I have the 30 color set, so I have all of them put into pans in this palette because, as I said before, I prefer to work in half pans that are pre-dried rather than working straight from the tubes. I do have all of the tubes here, and as you can see, they came in a lot of really great quantity. These are 7.5 milliliter tubes. They filled half pans really well, and I still have so much paint left over, so I don't think I'll ever run out of these paints. And I have really enjoyed using them for projects that don't require archival quality. I did a full review on these paints in a video. If you are interested, I will try to link it below in the description for you to just hear a little bit more in depth how these paints work and my thoughts on them. Similarly, I have a separate review on these watercolors as well. These are my Finetec pearlescent watercolors that I received for Christmas. These were so much fun to work with, and I really love these colors. I cannot wait to use these more often to accent different pieces from the other watercolors that I have and just continue to build my skills with these because they are a little bit different than I am used to and a little bit more opaque, I would say, than the Kuretake Gansai Tambi paints. But really beautiful color selection here, and differences in the colors as they go. So some of the colors, in my opinion, work better than others. I suggest that if you're interested in a full review of these, you look for my review, which I will also have linked for you down below. And finally in this category, I have my Master's Touch watercolors. I don't know if there's any additional words to that, but they are my cheap versus expensive watercolors. These were the cheap ones, so I wanted to test out the cheapest watercolors that I could personally find at the store that day. So I went to a Michael's, I picked out their particular brand of watercolors. I got all 24 of these watercolors for very cheap, and honestly, I think they were great. I think that for the amount of money that I spent on them, they worked fantastically well. I really enjoyed using them for that video and would certainly reach for them again if I just needed to lay down some color. Honestly, they're great for that purpose. If I'm not trying to make a piece that I am really happy with or proud of, I would reach for these just to convey a message. I think that they're again really great for beginners, really great just to try out different types of watercolors. So Master's Touch watercolor, probably gonna stick around in my collection for a bit longer. And again, just a fun little experiment, cheap versus expensive. My next category is gouache. So I consider gouache to be very similar to watercolor, and so I am including it in this video. Personally, I love working in gouache. I've got 3 different types of gouache. These 2 I've purchased since the last video, and I have actually unhauled one of my gouaches. So I had at that point the Marie's gouache. I have unhauled it. I've donated it to a student who was interested in painting so that they could enjoy them more than I was, because I just never reached for them. Let's talk about the repeat offender in this category as well first, which is my Arteza gouache. These are really great little student grade gouaches. They are very fun to work with, and my only real complaint with them is that the caps are really hard to open, and I find the packaging kind of frustrating on them, to be honest. And also, I just don't love, again, tubes. Tubes and me don't get along very well. So overall though, color-wise, I think that these work fantastically. Again, I've got more of my thoughts on these in the other video as well if you're interested, but my thoughts haven't really changed. I still do reach for these and I still do use them. Next, I have my acrylic gouache. Again, I've got a full review for these on my channel. I received these for Christmas, not last year, but the year before. I love these guys. Unfortunately, because they are so expensive, I don't reach for them as often as I wish I did. And also, acrylic gouache dries differently than regular gouache, so they're not as easily re-wet once they've dried, which is another reason that I don't reach for these as frequently. They're just not as forgiving as regular gouache. I know that you can always go over them, which is a handy feature, but not the feature that I tend to go for when I am painting. So I'm still trying to learn how to use these more effectively to create illustrations that are maybe a little bit more matte and color blocking than my typical gouache illustrations. But I do definitely recommend these and love them very much. I'm very appreciative to have them, and I plan to reach for them more in the future. And finally, this is probably my most used supply of the year, to be 100% honest, and that is my Miyahime gouache set. I love these paints. They are a no pressure solution to painting. They come with so much paint. I have used these, like I said, a ton, and I haven't even come close to hitting pan, even on the white. So 10 out of 10, enjoy these. They're not like the best quality, they're not artist quality gouache by any means, but they are just a lot of fun, and I think for what you get, like value for your money, these are fantastic. I would recommend these for anyone, beginner, intermediate, advanced, doesn't matter. They are just a really solid option as far as paint goes. I do have a full review for these on my channel as well, which again, I will link in the description because by this point I am definitely out of cards. My last actually colorful category in this video are my dry medium watercolors. So these are my watercolor pencils and my watercolor crayons. Now I had both of these in the previous video, so I will just briefly go through them, but these were newer purchase, and again, I do have a separate video on my channel for these. First, we have here my Derwent Graphic watercolor pencils. These are okay. I personally wouldn't really recommend these to people as your go-to watercolor pencil. They do leave streaks, they don't absorb, they don't dissolve in water, They don't dissolve in water as well as I wish that they would, and to be honest, I just don't really reach for them that frequently, but I have them still. I have not unhauled them, so they are technically part of my collection. I then have here my Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. I like these a lot more. I think that they work a lot better. And if I were to repurchase more watercolor pencils, they would be this kind, not the Derwent ones. So I have not done that yet because I just don't use watercolor pencils all that frequently. Typically they are, if I'm traveling and I need something that is dry and easy to pack, I will pack these instead of a wet watercolor. But other than that, I don't really reach for them that frequently, so I have not invested in a better set of these. But I've got the basics, and I think that they function just fine. And finally, we have the Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2 watercolor crayons. These are super fun to work with. I definitely plan on using these a lot more in the future. I cannot wait to do more and more pieces with these. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I love the color range. I love the way that these work with water, and even without water, they work really cool. So 10 out of 10 recommend these. I cannot wait, like I said, to use them more frequently. And if I find myself reaching for them more and more, I will end up purchasing a larger set of them because they are just that good. Something else that I think is always worth including in these videos is my paper and brushes. So my go-to watercolor paper is the Honeywell Cezanne 300 GSM. Really just nicely textured cold press paper. I don't know if you can adequately see the texture here, but it is just my favorite paper. It is a block of watercolor paper, so I can paint right on it without taping it down, and it works swimmingly well. It is expensive though, so I don't go to this when I can otherwise work in a sketchbook, which I have a whole separate video on my watercolor sketchbooks. If you want to check the card for that, I will leave one for you. I also have a block of the fluid watercolor paper, which is much cheaper, and this is only gummed on 2 of 4 sides, so it is not as high quality of paper, not as high quality of block, but still very functional for many pieces and also a joy to use. I have this cheap block of paper that I bought when I was doing my cheap versus expensive. I've honestly found that this paper worked fine, so I use it whenever I need to do swatches or anything that I'm not super worried about as far as the paper warping, but again, a really great option for very affordable. I have here my B watercolor paper, which I lost all of the packaging for because I only have a few pieces left, but I love this paper. It is great for beginners. It is a really affordable option as well, and you can find it on retailers like Amazon, and I will try to find a link for it just to their website as well. And then finally, I just have here my Edger watercolor postcards. I received these for Christmas. I have used other watercolor postcards in the past, and I cannot wait to use these because I cannot tell you how exciting it is to get to send somebody a painting in the form of a postcard. I highly recommend these to people because they are so much fun to work with, and as someone who does a lot of custom cards, I find that they are so worth it. As far as brushes go, these are my go-to brushes. I keep these select brushes on my desk at all times, and then every other brush that I own is in a drawer in my art box. Silver Black Velvet brushes. Cannot say enough good things about these. I love them. I reach for them in literally every single watercolor piece that I do, and for a good reason. They are just so high quality. They are a little bit tricky to find, and they are a little bit expensive. Okay, let me rephrase that. They're a lot of bit expensive, but I've had these for literally years and they still look like they did when they came out of the packaging. So if you take care of your brushes, I promise you they will last and they are worth the investment. The other brushes that I have here, I've got a few Royal & Langnickel Zen brushes. I love these brushes. Additionally, they are like my second go-tos, so I highly recommend them. I have a couple of Master's Touch brushes that I just got from Michaels. They work fine in a pinch. Again, they look exactly like they did when I got them, so clearly they work pretty well. I have this Raphael brush that I got with my Sennelier watercolors that I use for like really thick washes. This holds a lot of water, and it's actually more water than I'm used to, so I don't reach for it as often as the others, but it is a size that you'll consistently see, so I reach for this size quite a bit. And then I've just got my smaller brushes here. This one's actually also a Royal & Langnickel Zen brush. And then I've got another Master's Touch brush. I use this brush all the time when I am traveling. It is a Filbert brush in a size 2, I believe. Yeah, size 2. It is fantastic. I use it all the time. And then my final brush here is just a Royal Gold brush that is really fine tipped and really good for detail work. Those are my go-to brushes. I have a million other brushes, but these are my tried and true, use every day watercolor brushes. I hope that you guys enjoyed this tour of all of my watercolor supplies. I really enjoyed making this video. Let me know if you have any questions on any of the specific supplies down below. I will do my best to link everything that I can and supply you with videos that I've made on these supplies in the past so that you can do some further research on them before purchasing them yourself. Again, feel free to ask me any questions that you have. If you liked this video, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing to my channel as I post new art and book content every single Tuesday and occasionally on Fridays. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!